Olimpico is great, but great, yeah. So England has derbies. You have the North London derby, Manchester derby. But I think it's like the way that England lacks hooliganism and ultras culture, on top of just how corporate English football has become. Which again is massively benefit them financially, but it just does create a really strong distinction. Which is why I think it's incredible how the Premier League is viewed as the pinnacle of football, of club football. When thinking empirically, it's not. And certainly as a viewer, I compare a good atmosphere in Liga 1 or Serie A or the Bundesliga or the second Bundesliga, and there is a material difference in what I hear in the stadium. There's a massive difference compared to the Prem. When PSG went to Anfield, the ultras were completely out presencing Liverpool. Complete difference. Makes me want to support Everton. Oh, so that's never derby. I do think the Everton derby's underrated. Again, I think largely because of Everton supporters. And of course, you have the Sunderland Newcastle derby. Back in Derby di Milano, yeah. So it's not the Derby di Milano per se. I think there's something in reference to the cathedral in Milan, which I think people, which I think it's in reference to Milan derby. I think in general in Serie A, when you have Napoli play any of the northern Italian clubs, I think again to the degree it's like PSG is just simplistic, but you can think of it as basically the Grand Classique, the PSG Marseille symbolic representation, but for Italian football. Again, right, because Italy has the huge north-south divide. And it is striking. You look at a map of Serie A football clubs, and this is actually a phenomenon you kind of see in English football as well. Whereas England, there are not that many clubs from the north of the country. You have Newcastle, the Manchesters, Liverpool, but you don't really have teams from the Midlands. So it's just a very different, concentrated thing. And the same goes for Italian football, where in Italy, in the south of the country, you have a Napoli, you have Lecce, but then it's a huge paucity. Maybe you count Cagliari in Sardinia. I'm not Italian, so I'm not going to comment on the validity of Sardinia, but you certainly don't have any representation in. I think that's a nice view. But you certainly don't have a significant South Italian. You certainly don't have a Sicilian club, because Palermo is in Serie B. But you look at northern Italy, it's jam-packed. You have, of course, Monza is going to be relegated, but you have Monza, Torino, Juventus, Inter, Milan, Verona, Bologna, Venezia, Udinese, It's extremely North Italy focused. And you look at who has dominated, who has the most titles in Italian football. Inter, Juve, Milan, right? So again, just Italy itself is very north heavy. Of course, with the industrialization divide, and there is, I'm sure, also a connection to Sardinia, Piedmont versus the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, where apparently there's a massive tree stump. I assume this tree stump is the one that's screwing up this concrete. So good on it. Where apparently the Kingdom of the Two Sardinias was so regressive and so fucked up that even again, remember, like these monarch states were very opposed to anything that could upset the order, i.e. how quickly they jumped on Napoleon in France, including Napoleon himself and future Bonapartes. But apparently they were willing to let, I think, Italian nationalists take over, because it was Two Sicilies was that regressive. So again, to the degree to which football is descriptive of real world things, interesting to think about. And it just makes sense, right? Because football is part of the world. It is not separate from the world. I don't mean that in like a annoying, like, here's a BLM advert where to take a knee for a game, but I mean in like the influencing sense. I just mean in the pure descriptive sense. It's just a pure normative. Football is a part of the world. It is not above the world, and that just makes sense. So a nice little cinematography. Cinematography. Let's see, it's been an hour and 10 minutes, and the battery's at half, without using the charging pack. I will say, something I noticed when I listen to myself, and so I do notice it does sound like I'm breathing hard when I'm talking, which I dislike for the natural implication of my fitness. It's like, I don't know, I ran a mile to get to the subway station, to get to Metro. It's not too much of a belly, but so I do apologize for the heavy breathing, if that's the intonation. So I think honestly this is actually a pretty nice, because I think with this is of course this is a congressional cemetery. I don't have the most respect for probably the people that would be contained in there. I think respect to these people. As they don't have Wikipedia pages, but I think nevertheless had, presumably made contributions to society. So I think of this, I think this is probably one of the big DC cemeteries, and certainly cemeteries that are accessible. I imagine the congressional cemetery is a bit weird, probably a bit anal about things. So I will say, and I think this, I think all three are good. St. Mary's, this one, I think Prospect Hill is what you call this one, and then Glenwood. So honestly, it's not a bad way to just get a walk. Not too many cars. Of course, we had the one guy pass us. Of course, be respectful, just appreciative, tumbling to see the grave of a 1-year-old. But a pretty pleasant walk. Of course, it's not a highway, because there's a nominal speed limit. But yeah, this is Prospect Hill Cemetery, which I do respect and appreciate. I did think, right, it's like a cemetery, right? You think about how old some of these graves are. It's like 100 years old, right? And so it's, again, it's back to like the abundance thing, and like you should build. I do think there's something to be said about. I think there's something respectable about this. It's certainly humbling. I just think it's cool that you have something that exists so long. I think in the U.S., right, it's kind of hard to imagine things that have been around that long. It's not like you're like Asia or Europe, where you have things that are integrated into the cityscape that are centuries old. I think probably like this stuff from the 1870s. It's close to get to the U.S., but it's pretty cool. Suppose this will always be on the list if I have a new monologue I want to go on. This will be a good spot. Yeah, this is not a highway because you have that. I don't know if you can see it, but you have a speed limit camera of 25 nominally. It certainly feels louder and busier than that. Other derbies to speak about, probably Dortmund Schalke is a good one. Right, again, Schalke extremely underrated for just given how big a club is. Like think about like clubs with the top 10 members or socios. Schalke is consistently up there. It's a massive fan base, and it is incredible just how mismanaged, or just how the club has underperformed so significantly. I've got. You have to toss in the Berlin Hertha versus Union Berlin. Has to be put into the mix. This is German football is weird because you did have the German football is a bit weird because you have the East-South or the East-West divide. So Eastern German football is slightly emaciated, which is a shame for Rasenball Sport or RB Leipzig to kind of be the main presence of Eastern German football, even though you've got like Dynamo Dresden is a big club. There's not a big reputation. You've always got their classic curve, but between Dortmund and Bayern, I just don't think you can really say with a straight face that it's the same undertones. But I think in Moscow, Spartak, Dynamo, CSKA, Torpedo, Lokomotiv, Zenit. Of course, the etymology of Eastern European football clubs is fun. Where actually means something. Again, it makes sense, right? For football clubs to have originally had a certain meaning. For these things, right? Because first, right, like it's kind of like your factory where you go and play football together. It's in Eastern Europe. Those origins are just much more clear. And so CSKA, that's the Central Sports Club of the military. Dynamo is for the secret police, or police in general. Spartak is more of a people's club. Torpedo and Lokomotiv are more just straightforward, like industrial. Words for trains. Yeah, so I think trains are Lokomotiv. So I forget Torpedo. But it's not just a Russian thing. You look at like Bulgarian football, CSKA Sofia, right? Or again, Ukraine, right? Dynamo Kiev. Think about Belarus, Dynamo Minsk. Of course, I think that's it has a nice undertone. Again, like, to what degree is that undertone in any meaningful sense relevant? Not really nowadays, but I think it's a cool name, nomenclature to have. But other derbies, Poland's got some. Lechia. Sweden, you've got Stockholm. Like AIK versus Göteborg. Stuff like that. Danish football, Copenhagen. Yeah, I'm gonna speak out Danish football. I'd say Belgium. You got, of course, Belgium's a funny thing. It's not explicit to me how much if there is like a Flemish, I'm showing my ignorance, but the joke about Belgium is that it shouldn't really exist because of how it's half French and half Dutch, so it really shouldn't exist. So I forget which part of it, like there's a Flemish, which I'm pretty sure is I don't want to say, but you have the Flemish part, and there's a term for the other part, which is the other constituent group. But I'm not sure how much of that is an undertone when it comes to the derbies. Let's move down the line. Dutch football. Because you have your big three in the Netherlands: Ajax, PSV, Eindhoven, Feyenoord. Yeah, let's just go down the line. Of course, Scotland. You got the old firm, Celtic versus Rangers. And I will say, back on the point of on the nose, Celtic versus Rangers, incredibly on the nose, between like literally like your Union Jack Rangers versus Irish nationalism for Celtic. But again, subtlety is its own vice. I can't complain too much. Ireland, I can't say too much about that. Portugal, you've got Lisbon. So you've got Benfica versus Sporting. And again, Portugal's in a very spiky country. So then I would argue you've got Benfica, Porto, as well. In general, like the big three. Spain, you have to say El Clasico, but it's just really strange because you can't say it's a real derby because you can't say there's that venom. It's extremely strange when Barca is trying to help out Madrid, or when Madrid is trying to help out Barca with registering players and its different financial rules. So it's quite obvious that it's not quite a real thing, a real derby with that undertone, which makes derbies spicy and incredibly fun. And you still don't have that venom among the players. At the same time, though, you do have the Madrid derby, which I would say has some spice and venom to it. I think there, of course, you do have like a city split. I think a very tangible city split. For the Madrid derby. But I think the difference for that derby is the players actually dislike each other, which is big, to an underrated degree. For that to actually be the case. Again, we're like, part of it's probably because there's fewer Brazilians in the Atleti squad, whereas between Real and Barca, you do have a shared Brazilian contingent. So, which has its detrimental effects. It also, I suppose you can also say Barca versus Espanyol in Catalonia is a derby. Again, just extremely different financial capabilities. But conceptually, right, it's Real Espanyol. Or, take that back, but Espanyol, of course you have Catalonian separatism. But the big distinction, or fun nuance, is that whereas Barca is very associated with Catalonia and separatism, Espanyol is more associated with more pro-union than Barca. So there is an undertone in that sense. Again, I can't say it really exists in any meaningful sense in a sporting sense. More broadly, for French or Spanish football, you have the fun wrinkle of so they have clubs in Spain which have Real in front of them, like of course Real Madrid, Real Sociedad, Real Betis, Real Valladolid, and so effectively that's it's a remnant of the Spanish crown, where the Spanish crown would have essentially bestowed that title on certain clubs. Let's create that, and of course those clubs, they get to have the crown. So of course, most famous with Real Madrid. Those other clubs have it as well. So that's I think a fun wrinkle. Certainly some added personality to Spanish football. Also in Spain, you have Sevilla. This is Real Betis, which is, of course, in Sevilla. This is a fun derby. Others in Spain, Valencia, Villarreal should have its spot. Yeah, I can't say that. But in general, Spanish football has less of a domineering fan culture. Because I think German fan culture very impressive. I think, again, just noticeably different than others. That's Spain, Portugal. This is moving back west. We cover Italy. Of course, it's Serbia. You have to mention the eternal derby with Partizan and I can't say the Serbian name for it, but a Red Star Belgrade. It's great. Of course, Turkey, Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, all the Istanbul, well, maybe Istanbul, Basa, Heskir, less so. But Beşiktaş, Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, those derbies are great. Trabzonspor versus those guys. Also fun. Again, back to, I suppose, yeah, Turkey has the same, I suppose not so much the north-south, east-west divide, as much as it's just a literal Istanbul versus rest of the country setup. Istanbul. That's the big one in Turkey. Romania. You have a Cluj derby. You have Bucharest as one. Anybody else? Bulgaria, Sofia. Derbies. But yeah, in general, derbies are fun. Again, not all of them are made equal. So something like Nice and Monaco has much more of a added aesthetic to it than, I would argue, El Clasico. Which again, isn't an indictment, but just a normative statement about those two things. So, suppose there is some pro and anti-abortion and graffiti, but it's been an hour and a half, so thanks for watching.